Okay, let's dive in. Picture this. You're a kid, maybe, and there's a map on the wall. Could be an old atlas, maybe just a poster, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it just sparks something in you, that first real question. What's out there? You know, what's beyond what I can see?
Yeah, that pull of the unknown.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for the person whose reflections we're exploring today, that wasn't just a fleeting thought. It really became, well, a way of life, the
Yeah.
driving force behind everything.
And it's crucial to understand the scale here based on the source material. We're not talking a few trips. It's nearly 80 countries visited.
80. Wow.
Yeah, covering more than half the world's landmass. Think about that, the sheer diversity.
Yeah.
Over 50 languages encountered, dozens of belief systems.
Everything from major religions to sort of local traditions, secular views.
And billions of people. It's this huge tapestry of human experience they're drawing from.
So what really pushed this? The source points back to that childhood curiosity, that wonder about the distance. But it clearly evolved, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It went way beyond just, ticking off places on a list.
Right. And all that interaction, seeing so much, led to this really profound idea, a quote that kind of guides this whole reflection. Man is completed when he learns to see his identity not outside borders, but in the mirror of others.
That quote really reframes the whole purpose of travel, doesn't it? It flips it.
How so?
Well, it shifts it from being about looking out, collecting experiences, sights, to looking in. Your identity isn't this fixed thing you carry around to judge the world with. Instead, it becomes clearer, more complete, as the quote says. When you see aspects of yourself reflected in the vast diversity of people you meet outside your usual world, it's like self-discovery through connection.
I like that. Self-discovery through connection.
Yeah.
So our mission for this deep dive, then, is to really follow that thread.
Mm-hmm.
Let's unpack the observations, the memories, the questions that came out of these years of incredible travel. We want to get a handle on what this source reveals about really understanding places, people, and, ourselves.
And not just by crossing lines on a map, but by, engaging with the human landscape.
Exactly.
And the source suggests, interestingly, that deep understanding doesn't necessarily start with the big landmarks.
No. Where then?
It starts with something much simpler, almost mundane, just getting lost walking around a neighborhood.
Getting lost. Okay, tell me more. Why is just aimless walking seen as so important?
Well, it's about dropping the plan, isn't it? Letting go of the checklist.
Right, no itinerary.
Exactly. When you just walk, you start to notice the real rhythm of life, the little interactions on the street corner, the sounds, the smells, the unplanned stuff that actually reveals the character of a place.
Okay.
And the source even offers this, surprising litmus test for genuine connection.
Yeah.
You know you're starting to be accepted, not when someone gives you a polite tourist smile, but
But when
you can haggle in the local market and get a fair price.
Ah, okay. That mundane moment actually signifies something deeper.
Yeah, it means you're being seen not just as an outsider, but as someone who, gets the local dynamic a little bit. You're understood on some level.
That's a fantastic concrete example. So from those small steps, the journey often starts, of course, at these big hubs, airports. The source talks about them too.
Right, as the initial gateways, places filled with waiting, unfamiliar languages buzzing around, that mix of tension and excitement.
How does the source frame the significance of arriving somewhere new like that?
Each landing wasn't just, okay, I'm here.
Yeah.
It was an opening into, uncertainty, meeting new people, and often learning something completely unexpected right from the get-go.
That first sensory hit, even before you leave the terminal.
Exactly that.
And speaking of senses, this journey wasn't just visual, was it? The source puts a huge emphasis on sound, on listening.
Oh, definitely. They describe actively seeking out music, not just the easy stuff. Music from places like Lesotho, Eswatini.
Really getting off the beaten path.
Yeah, remote islands like Fiji, Papua New Guinea, hearing unique traditional instruments. But also, structured collections like at the Met in New York, or even a specialized guitar museum down in Florida. It was this global sound journey.
Which leads to a really big question. The source tackles. What can listening to a place's music actually tell us?
And the claim is pretty bold. Trying to understand the music is trying to understand how that society feels.
How does the source explain that? How does sound convey feeling on a societal level? Is it the instruments, the rhythm, lyrics?
It seems to be something deeper, maybe more primal. The source suggests sound often communicates before words can. They talk about the breath in Eastern flutes, the drums in Africa that vibrate with the actual skin they're made from.
Right.
the very planned structures of European symphonies versus the raw, often painful stories embedded in jazz and American bars.
So different sonic languages expressing something fundamentally human.
Yes, they felt the essence of humanity was present in all of it, just spoken differently through sound.
Are there specific examples that stand out?
Oh, absolutely. Really vivid ones. Feeling the music in Azerbaijan, for instance, and sensing it carried this weight of social memory echoes of the past, but also hope. And then there's this experience in Chicago at the Green Mill Cocktail Lounge, the legendary jazz club with ties to Al Capone.
Yeah, I know one.
Sitting there, the author felt jazz wasn't just music. It was described as like a way of life, a raw cry for survival that somehow held both the pain and the enduring faith of a people.
That really brings it alive, doesn't it? It's not just entertainment, it's the cultural heartbeat.
Exactly. And it's not just sound telling these deep stories. The source argues taste does too. They actually say a single spoonful of soup can tell 1,000 years of history.
1,000 years in a spoonful. How do they justify that? What is it about food, especially local street food, that connects so directly to history and place?
Well, they paint these incredible pictures with words, bubbling street food in Thailand, fragrant tagines in Morocco, that almost perfect sashimi in Japan.
Making me hungry just thinking about it.
Right. The perfect pizza dough rising in Italy, the explosion of color and flavor in a Fijian market. The feeling is that each dish holds the patience, the joy, the collective memory of the people who created it.
And the places where food is shared, the markets.
The markets are described as crucial, not just places to buy stuff, but the absolute heartbeats of the community, where culture is transmitted silently right alongside the buying and selling.
That link between food, markets, community, it feels really important, especially when you contrast it with what the source says about globalization.
Right, because that's the tension, isn't it? Differences are blurring. The source uses Perth, Australia, as an example. You can find food from everywhere on one street now.
Which shows global connection, sure.
But the argument is, in this age where things can feel increasingly similar, finding the authentic essence of a place becomes even more valuable, more crucial.
So the source is basically saying you can't truly get the spirit of, say, Morocco by just eating at a familiar global chain restaurant there.
Precisely. To find that essence, you have to push beyond the easy and familiar. You need to wander those neighborhoods, haggle in those markets, maybe just sit in a park and watch local kids playing.
And speaking of kids playing, there's a really moving observation from Madagascar shared in the source.
Ah, yes. Seeing children playing, not with fancy toys, but with old tin cans.
But the description is that the park was filled with their smiles, described as pure, unmissing smiles. What was the takeaway from that?
It was a powerful lesson, the source says, about wealth. True wealth isn't about what you have, it's about what you carry in your heart.
And this was a recurring observation.
Apparently so. Time and again, the feeling was that people in places with fewer material things often offered the warmest welcomes, the most open hearts.
So this journey wasn't just about observing culture through senses, it was also about witnessing things happening. Specifically, the source talks about seeing the effort behind establishing Turkish schools around the world.
Yes, and this section feels quite personal and deeply felt in the writing. It describes educators, volunteers, working with what's called boundless love across borders, often really far from home.
And these weren't just teachers, they were like cultural ambassadors.
In a way, yes. Sometimes they were the only people from Anatolia in an entire country, and they built trust slowly, patiently through their actions, their ethics, their humility, not just teaching academics, but building real relationships based on trust and friendship.
And the impact, according to the source, went beyond just the school walls.
Definitely. They weren't just schools. They were seen as centers building bridges of peace and understanding. They organized cultural events, provided aid where needed, held dialogue meetings, engaged in volunteer work.
Trying to foster genuine connection.
Exactly. The source recounts how they helped people in these communities get to know Turkey, not through politics, but through the success of the students and the often tearful gratitude expressed by parents.
But there's a painful side to this mention, isn't there?
Yes, a very sharp contrast. This huge effort, this dedication to building connections abroad, was apparently met with deep ingratitude back in their homeland over time. It's described as tragic.
Yet, despite that,
the source holds this firm belief that these individuals represented something universal, human values, conscience, the importance of dialogue far beyond any national identity.
and that's why sharing these stories feels important to the source.
It seems so, to bear witness. Because, as the source argues, some kinds of heroism don't make headlines. They're written in the memories and hearts of the people directly impacted. This reflection is partly about honoring those quiet, dedicated efforts.
It's a really powerful point about impact often being built quietly, relationally, far from the spotlight. The source also touches on how places themselves change, right?
Briefly. Mentioning Seoul, for example. Visited 25 years ago, it was this mix of old and new, now a global digital hub.
And South Africa.
Seen 20 years ago, still searching for identity after apartheid. Today, more confident, but still on what's described as a painful journey.
So it highlights that discovery is ongoing for places and for us.
Absolutely. The world keeps turning and our understanding evolves with it.
So wrapping this up, this deep dive, shows us is not just a travelogue. It's really a journey into sound, into connection, into history, found in food, and into witnessing this quiet, dedicated work.
Yeah, and what stands out is how interconnected it all is. The senses, the walking, the witnessing, it all weaves together for a richer understanding. It really reinforces that core idea. Exploring the world out there changes you in here.
Which brings us back to that starting point, doesn't it? Man is completed when he learns to see his identity in the mirror of others.
Yeah.
It's about transformation through connection.
Exactly. And that very first line from the source, you hang the map on the wall, but the real journey begins when you close your eyes.
Right. So if the physical map is just the spark, and the real journey is internal, using the world as a mirror, it leaves us with a question, doesn't it? For you, listening now, what kind of internal journey, what kind of deeper exploration could you start today, maybe inspired by some of these ideas? What maps, literal or metaphorical, are you using? And what essence are you seeking to understand, either out in the world or maybe within yourself?
Something to definitely